All right, today's guest will be giving us an education in extreme. Joining us is an ECW original. He is never at a loss for words and always hardcore. Ladies and gentlemen, please give us a warm AWP welcome to Axl Rotten.
That was a great introduction, guys. Thanks. Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. And like I said in our correspondence in the email, nothing is off limits. Nothing is too kayfabe. Nothing is too shoot. Nothing is too hardcore. Whatever you guys want to talk about, let's do it and let's have a good time.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks for joining us today. So, our first question is just what have you been up to lately? There's a lot of things that have been swirling around that you may be involved with, possible autobiography. What have you been up to lately?
Yeah, the book itself has been in the works since literally, I want to say 2005, and it's just the problem. It's not a problem. The point is, I hate typing and I hate writing. So it's like what I'm looking for right now is a legitimate, I guess, quote unquote, ghostwriter to help me out with it. And basically what I'm going to do is I have notebooks already full of stuff from over the years. And what I'd like to do is have someone who can transcribe it and put it in a more linear fashion and edit it and make it make some sense. So if there's anyone out there that is an editor or ghostwriter who is listening to this podcast, get in touch with me at therottenone@gmail.com. That's TheRottpene @gmail.com, because I'd love to talk to you. I really want to get this project underway. It's something that, almost everyone I spoke to said, dude, you have got so many stories and so many things in you that are fascinating. You really need to write this down. And they're not just talking about from the pro wrestling side. They're talking about my life experience and things before wrestling and things after ECW. So I'm looking forward to do that. It's really something that I have a couple working titles already for the book, and I've had major people tell me that they would really think that the mass public, not just wrestling fans, would be interested in hearing this. So it's something that I'm really passionate about, and I'm going to move forward with it.
Awesome. Well, Axl, I hope we can get that out to the masses listening today, and hopefully you'll get contacted soon about it. But you've been pretty open and candid about your health and sobriety. How are you feeling these days?
Well, the thing, sobriety is great. I mean, I'll give just a little story about that, trying to keep it kind of short. The whole thing was, throughout the '90s and the zeros, the 2000s, it was a real hard ride because, in the '90s it was, ECW, it was the pain and the constant beating and traveling and the stuff that we did. We worked really hard, so we put ourselves and our bodies through a lot of pain, and I knew. This predates ECW. I knew at the age of 18, I already had a curved spine and problem with my vertebrae. But pro wrestling was in my blood, and it was something that I couldn't get out. I had, a doctor telling me, hey, if you want to be walking by the time you're 40, you really want to quit this wrestling stuff right now. And I was like, there's no way in hell I'm going to quit wrestling at the age of 18 or 20. Well, I mean, I started when I was 16, but it was just like throughout the years, the pain and things got worse, and it started out with just pills and led to stronger pills and more pills, and finally it led to heroin because I had a quote unquote friend who said, oh man, I can get you something that's so much cheaper than you're paying for these pills, and it's stronger. I didn't know anything. The only thing I knew about heroin was that I watched Sid and Nancy, and Sid Vicious and Nancy Spungen, were heroin addicts, being, obviously a Sex Pistols fan, Johnny Rotten, Axl Rotten, that's where I got the name. That's what I knew about it. I didn't know anything that if you don't take it for a couple of days, you get deathly ill and sick and, vomit all over the place. But make a long story short, the way that it worked for me was WWE sent me to 2 rehabs. I went to about 8 altogether. And it finally didn't click until I realized what I needed to do was put a distance between that whole addict behavior and myself. And the only way that I could do that was getting on a methadone maintenance program. Now, some of your hardcore old timers will say, oh, methadone is just substituting one drug for the other. But what it did for me was it took me away from that drug addict mentality. And, after being on it for 4 years, I'm proud to say that I'm no longer on any substance, no methadone, anything like that. I'm able to be 100% opiate free. I don't deal with anything like that. And I think the way that it worked was I had to separate myself from that whole scene. And that's what methadone did for me. It gave me an opportunity to live a normal life again. So I'm real happy for it, and it blessed me with, being able to wake up in the morning and not have to worry about the first thing is, oh my God, how am I going to get high today? So it's been a great blessing.
Now, Axl, like we said earlier, you're pretty outspoken. You have been in the past. I wondered if you've seen this video that's making its rounds on the internet. There's a wrestler by the name of Chris Dickinson, and he powerbombed Kimber Lee. Have you seen that video yet?
Oh, yeah, he beat the hell out of that girl. See, I don't know if that was a work or a shoot, so it's kind of hard for me to comment on it. I don't know. I mean, if it was a shoot and he did that to her, he's just a plain dick. But if it's a work, it was a hell of a work, because I'll give credit to that girl. She took an ass whipping. So I'm not quite sure. And I don't know that area. I don't know those people. I've never heard of them before a day in my life until I saw the video yesterday. But maybe you guys know more about those people than I do. But what is the rumor? Is it a work? Is it a shoot? Or how are they playing it off?
Now they kind of wrestle a lot around here, and the gentleman Chris Dickinson, the guy who is doing the power bomb, he is kind of known for doing those sorts of things. So it leads me to believe that it may be a work, but there's a lot of people that are involved with the promotion and stuff too that seem to be kind of distancing themselves from him. So I don't know right now. I just didn't know. Obviously, in ECW, there were some times when men wrestled women, and even in WWE it happened. But it seemed to me like they showed a little more care and consideration for the female wrestler, or just any wrestler whenever that happened. So I just didn't know what your initial thoughts were. But I guess once we find out a little bit more, maybe we can find out your thoughts on it then.
Well, no, I can give you I've seen the whole video. I can give you my explicit thoughts on it, and it'll be in 2 categories. A, if it was a shoot, the guy's a total asshole, unprofessional, and shouldn't be working anywhere. No one should ever book that guy again. I mean, because, in ECW, there were times when Lita, who was working there at the time, slapped the shit out of me in the face, and I was, punched her, but it was a work, and people went nuts. There were times when Tommy Dreamer pile drive Francine and people like that. It was a total work. But, the stuff I saw in that video, to put in the other category, if it was a work, I give that girl kudos because she took a freaking ass whipping. But again, I see no reason to do an angle like that if it's a work, unless you're going to come out of it with something to draw money and give that, because obviously if it's a work, that girl has got to beat him at some time. So if the guy is doing it as a work, he knows full well that somewhere down the road he's got to lay down and do the favor for the girl. So if it's an angle, it's a great angle and it should draw money. But if it's a shoot, that's just totally disrespectful and unbelievable, because there's obviously no way that girl had any chance of kicking that guy's ass.
Yeah. All right. Well, Axl, do you spend much time watching a lot of wrestling these days? I mean, there's so much on TV right now or online, from WWE to TNA, New Japan, anything and everything's happening right now. There's so much to keep up with. Do you watch the current state of pro wrestling, or what are your thoughts about it?
Well, there is no current state of professional wrestling. Pro wrestling, as I know it, is dead. What we're watching now is sports entertainment and spot monkeys. There's not really anything worth watching because, well, no, I'll tell you whom I like to watch. I'll tell you the people that I like to watch. I like to watch Mark and Jay Briscoe. I love those guys. I don't care what they're doing or who they're doing it with. I love the Briscoe brothers. I love watching NXT to see Kevin Owens now, and I love to see Aaron Neville and Finn Balor. Those guys are fun to watch, but again, to me, they're just not. And I hate to sound like an old curmudgeon because I'm not. I'm only 43 years old, so it's just that I started so young. I just believe that, pro wrestling was so much more fun when it was pro wrestling, when it was organic, when you got in the ring and you called it in the ring and you worked off the energy of the crowd. Nowadays, everything is overwritten, overproduced, and everyone has to go A, B, C, D, E, and if they miss B, they cannot get to C. So what WWE is in a sense doing with NXT is basically saying we don't care about the independents. I heard Triple H say this. We don't want those guys. Everyone and anyone who ever comes to WWE from now on will have to go through NXT and be retrained in a WWE manner, which means you will be trained to be a sports entertainer, not a pro wrestler. And that's the one thing that bothers me. Ring of Honor, to me, looks too choreographed at times, and that's what bothers me. WWE, its main product, Raw, is too boring because there is no competition. You remember back during the Monday Night Wars, you would never start the show off with 20 minutes of talking because you would change the channel to Nitro because you could see, Juventud wrestling Ray Jr. and you'd get a great wrestling match. Or, you would, if you were watching Nitro and it was a 20-minute boring Hulk Hogan promo, you could turn the channel and you could see Stone Cold Steve Austin wrestling The Rock because there was such competition. Now that there is no competition, to me, WWE has become so complacent and so over-the-top egotistical that they can do whatever they want and they will dictate to the wrestling fan, you'll watch this, you'll like it, and if you don't, we don't care.
Yeah.
Now, Axl, when you worked for ECW, there were times that the fans and some of the wrestlers alike actually felt that the envelope was pushed too far with some angles or whatever. So was there anything that happened when you were there that you actually personally thought went too far?
Oh, you're talking to me. You're talking to a guy who's been lit on fire, thrown into thumbtacks, beat with barbed wire bats, cut with broken glass. So it's kind of hard. It's funny because the night that Kurt Angle was there and, he was going to actually work with ECW and everyone got all offended because Raven, hung Sandman on a cross. And I didn't see that as anything too offensive because what we're doing is an art form and that was just telling the story. It wasn't anything more than being part of the show. It was, but people would then have to say, well, my God, this is real. Well, first and foremost, you have to understand you're watching pro wrestling. It's not real. So no one was trying to be anti-religious. No one was trying to be sacrilegious. And that was the one thing that everyone got all nuts about. And there was a time, when Cactus or Mick Foley, had a flaming chair and the fire went into the crowd. From someone who's worked with fire, you can't control fire. You can't tell fire, you can't call a spot, okay, fire, you sit in the corner and I'm going to come in down and drop kick you. Fire's going to go where it's going to go. So a lot of crazy things happened, but I don't think that we ever did something that was in such bad taste that it completely crossed the line. I think what we did was push the envelope to areas that pro wrestling had never seen before. And also, I'll go so far as to say, if there never was an ECW, there would have never been an Attitude Era, because basically we started the Attitude Era, and WWE, WWF at the time, just basically ripped off what we were doing to a milder extent.
Definitely. Now, Axl, you are probably arguably the best known for your ECW. You spent many years wrestling prior to that. Are you frustrated maybe that people don't talk too much about your pre-ECW career?
Well, I think that ECW was so polarizing that people tend to forget that, I wrestled for the USWA, I wrestled for WCW, I wrestled for Global Wrestling Federation, and before there was ECW and blood and chairs and all that stuff, I was doing this little known art called pro wrestling. And if you watch the stuff that I do, it's old school. I love old school wrestling. And even if you watch some ECW stuff that I did, especially, one of the matches that everyone still talks about, and it was Rob Van Dam's first match, and you can see in that match where he debuts, we don't use chairs, tables, blood, or nothing, and it's a hell of a match, and I put that match together because it was obviously Rob's first night in the company, and he had no idea what to expect. And I told, Sad Lou came up to me and it was like, go out, Axl, can you get him out there and just get these people behind him and make him look good? I got it. I got no problem with it, and that's the kind of stuff with working with Tracy Smothers, even in ECW. I'll give an example. We did a match in ECW Arena. It was Balls, Axl, and Dreamer versus the FBI, including Tommy Rich, in a 6-man match. Now, mind you, this is the ECW Arena. We went out there and went 45 minutes and did no tables, no chairs, no blood. It was nothing but old school Memphis style wrestling. And we had the people, now some of the hardest fans in the world, in the ECW arena right in the palm of our hand, and they loved it. We did nothing more than, hey, he pulled my hair, this, that, and the other, false tags, made the hot tag. We did kind of a dusty finish with a ref bump, and the people went crazy. So, yeah, it does kind of offend me a little bit that people don't really, talk about the stuff that I can do. But here's the thing. The people that do know, guys like Terry Funk, Shane Douglas, Raven, people that are pretty intelligent in this business, they'll tell you Axl Rotten has one of the greatest minds in the wrestling business and is one hell of a worker. Raven says it all the time, and Terry Funk will tell you that all the time. It's just that people don't recognize me that way because I became famous for the blood, the guts, and the gore, and not exactly the side headlock takedown stuff. So that's kind of how it worked out.
All right.
Now, Axl, when you started your career as a pro wrestler, what was your ultimate goal?
Well, I think as any kid, when I was a teenager, 13, 14, I used to help set up the ring down at the Baltimore Civic Center when WWF came to town, tie the tag ropes on and during tag team matches, help sweep up when George Steele tore the turnbuckle off. So obviously my ultimate goal was to wrestle for WWF or WWE. And I got that opportunity several times. I wrestled for WWF in dark matches at the Baltimore Civic Center, and also, got the opportunity to be on Monday Night Raw, to be on SmackDown. Although it wasn't for a long period of time, when they gave the rebirth of ECW, I was one of the first guys signed, but I just, people hate to hear this because they want to think there was some elaborate story. But I didn't show up because I just had a bad feeling in my gut that they were going to ruin ECW, and ultimately I was correct. So, you know, I have my pride when it comes to that. Those guys that showed up, like, you know, and did the ECW, WWE thing, basically lost all of their credibility, and were just beat to death, and it just made the brand look bad. Anytime, you know, Vince McMahon is your champion, and they put the belt on some of these, you know, all it was Vince's opportunity to ruin ECW. So, you know, I'm kind of glad I didn't show up on that, because I would probably ended up doing a job to Rene Dupree or somebody like that.
Nice. Now, what are your thoughts on people who condemn hardcore wrestling?
You know, to each his own, and this is my opinion. I personally don't like watching a match where there's no psychology. And ring psychology to me is very important. If you watch even the Taipei Death match, between the first one between myself and Ian, which, as a matter of fact, it's hard to believe, this year marks 20 years ago that we did that match. That's like,
wow.
It seems like yesterday, because people will keep talking about it and bringing it up. But to get back to your question, there is psychology in that brawl. We do heat, we do a comeback. You know, in most of my matches that I do that are quote-unquote hardcore, in my mind, hardcore isn't blood. It isn't chairs. Hardcore to me means going out there and working as hard as you can to do whatever it is that you do best to entertain the people. So when people condemn some of the stuff, now I'm not going to call it hardcore. I'm going to call it garbage wrestling. The stuff like that people are beating each other with light bulbs and taking razor wire to themselves and taking, I don't know, mouse traps and, you know, all that stuff, and just throwing themselves into it. It's got, and another one that I really love is when these idiots take the hypodermic needle and shove it in themselves. I mean, to me, that takes no talent, you know, and this is coming from a guy, like I said, that has done a lot of those crazy matches. But the thing is, back in 1994 and 1995, Ian and I were basically bringing that style of ultra-violent hardcore to America, because it had never been done to that level. And to be honest, even some of the people that had worked for Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine, some of the writers and photographers have said the only reason they showed up to cover ECW in the beginning was to see if what they heard about the Axl versus Ian feuds were true. So to our credit, we brought a lot of national press to ECW because we were doing that crazy stuff. But I don't condemn it, but what I do condemn is guys that don't have any ability at all and are just going out there and for no reason hurting themselves and putting themselves in ultimate danger for no reason. And that's how I feel about it.
Okay, now with that style, the quote-unquote hardcore wrestling style, it usually means typically that there's bloodshed. With several instances of bloodborne diseases being shared in the ring recently, what are your thoughts on blood in wrestling today?
You know, it's kind of scary, because I'll be the first one to tell you, I've done everything that is humanly possible to obtain some kind of communicable disease, and I don't have any. And I'm blessed, and I don't care if people like to hear this or not. It's only by the grace of God that I'm healthy when it comes to those type of things, because there's too many occasions where, you know, there was a lot of bodily fluids being thrown around in ECW. And honestly, because I'm not in favor of going out there these days and doing that stuff anymore. I don't really want to go out and bleed all over the place, and I don't want anyone bleeding on me, because I know that I'm healthy and I know that I don't have anything. And what scares me to death is taking the chance now at this stage in my career and my life of coming down or contracting hepatitis or HIV or any of those types of diseases. So I'm really, I don't think that, it's needed, but you got these promotions, you have these promotions that run these deathmatch, tournaments, and everyone tries to outdo one another with how much blood or how much they can get, who's bleeding on who. And I just think it's not a great idea. What you're doing every time you do that, you might as well be taking a revolver and putting it to your head and clicking it, because you're playing Russian roulette with your life, And I finally realized that, after, all the tests that I've had and everything is clear and I'm fine, that I don't want to take that chance again. And I worry about the guys that do, because a lot of them are doing it for $50. They're not really getting paid that much money. And is your life really worth it? So I kind of frown upon these crazy, ultra violent light tubes, death match type things, because it's really not worth your life to go out there and do that stuff.
Definitely. And now WWE, the world's biggest wrestling company, they pretty much changed their programming to PG over the past several years. How do you think ECW will be remembered by the fans in the years to come?
Well, ECW, here's the thing, that ECW to this day will not die. And you can still hear ECW chants on WWE television occasionally, because we did such a different thing at that time in the wrestling business, and the people that were there and saw it live, they'll never forget it. And the people that are just seeing it on DVD and video and such, they're getting to the point where they show it to their friends and their family, and it just has taken on a life of its own. And I don't think that it'll ever die, because people want to, it's kind of like your favorite song. Every time you hear it, you kind of have a little smile on your face, because you remember where you were when you heard it, or the girl that you were with when, it was your song, or something like that. And that's the way ECW is. It's like people are so attached to it emotionally that they will just never let it die, because it's such an endearing thing to their past, and they want to hand it down to their kids and their friends. I just think it's one of those things that still 10 years from now, people will still be talking about it.
Okay, now actually you're in a small club of wrestlers who spent time in WCW, ECW, WWF/E, and in TNA. What do you attribute to your longevity and success in pro wrestling?
Because I'm just fucking great. No. The only thing that I have and that I'm willing to quote unquote brag about is I have an innate charisma, and people have told me that. Mick Foley has said that. Paul Heyman has told me that. Dusty Rhodes has said that. It's just that I have the ability to just connect with a crowd. It's one of those things that I just kind of, you can't teach someone. Either you have it, Mick Foley said that about me in an interview for a newspaper. He said, Axl has that it factor that you can't teach somebody. And, of course, if I would have taken that when I was younger and gotten into really probably great shape, I would have probably had a long career in WWF, because I had that ability to connect, and I had that charisma and the ability to cut a promo in one take and get it done. And I think that's what I attribute to the reason that people connect with me, is because I look and act like they do. I don't look like, and I always say this, it's about the WWE roster, with the exception of a few guys. It looks like a big metrosexual underwear model convention, because everyone looks exactly the same, with their little skimpy tights and their waxed chest and their suntan. So it's like, I connect, with people and have that charisma where, I look like a guy that would sit in the bar and have a couple beers with you. Then we'd have a disagreement. We'd go out back, have a fight. Then we come back in and drink a few more beers, So I think that's the reason that people like me, and the fact that, I genuinely do care about the fans, and I do little things still on indie shows that a lot of guys won't do, like, my customized steel chairs that I paint up and stuff like that. Sometimes I'll sell them, but then there's other times I'll just, point to the crowd, and whichever section is the loudest, I'll just go out and pick someone and hand them the chair, and, people love that, when you're that personable and able to just connect with them on that level. And I think that's what I attribute to the fact that people, still give a damn about me after all these years, especially after not being on TV for quite a long time. I still have quite a good fan base.
Awesome. Now, Axl, what would you say some of your greatest successes are in pro wrestling, and maybe do you have some of your biggest failures in pro wrestling?
Well, I look at my successes are simply that I achieved what I said I wanted to do, which was become a professional wrestler. I said that, at age 4 or 5, I can't recall. I told my grandfather, this is what I want to do. And I set out. By the time I was 16, I was doing it. So, that to me was a crowning success, that I was just able to achieve what I wanted to do. As far as failures, I don't look back with any type of trepidation or any type of anger of things that could have, should have, would have happened, because all things happen the way they're supposed to. So as far as that, I don't really look at failures or things that I could have or should have done, because everything worked out the way it was supposed to, and I'm happy with my career. I mean, a lot of people that love to dog me, all I can say is, when you're sitting there putting me down, all I can do is look at the facts. The facts are simple. I wrestled for ECW, WWE, WCW, TNA, every major company that was ever around in this country. I have an action figure of myself. I've been on a video game. I've been on the main event segment of Monday Night Raw, main event segment of SmackDown. Although not for, years and years, but I did those things. I accomplished those things, main evented pay-per-views in ECW and had a great role and a great time. So when you're out there bashing me and putting me down, sit and think for a minute, what did you achieve before you start, throwing stones at me? So that's how I feel about it.
Okay, now you spent a lot of time in the business and worked with a lot of upcoming wrestlers on the independent level. What, in your mind, do you think are some things that aspiring wrestlers need to know before getting into the business?
They need to know, before getting into the business, I think they need to know that there is no guarantee, especially now, that you're ever going to be on television, that you'll ever become a millionaire. So you better do this because you love professional wrestling. Because let's face it, there is no WWF, WCW, AWA, USWA, World Class. There's not Florida Championship Wrestling. There's not, Deep South. There's nowhere to go. There's WWE, and that's it if you want to make money. I don't know how this happened, but somewhere along the line, the terrible American talent has ruined going to Japan and making money. So it's hard for even guys to go to Japan and make money now. So that's what I would tell someone who is aspiring to be in this business is, hey, listen, do this because you love it, not because you want to use it as a stepping stone to be a movie star, a rock star, or anything else. Be happy in the fact that if you learn how to wrestle, that someone will book you and put you on a show. And if you are lucky enough to make it to NXT, which will take you to WWE, great. But if not, be happy in the fact that you are just doing what you love. That's what would be my advice to anyone who wants to be involved in wrestling.
lightning round.
What word sums up your wrestling career?
Controversial.
Okay. What are your thoughts on Ian Rotten?
Oh man, quick. My thoughts are that when it's all said and done, at the end of the day, he's got a good heart and he really tries to do what's best.
All right, ECW was notorious for partying and crazy backstage antics. What is something you saw backstage that you still think about today?
I saw a girl smoke a cigarette with her vagina.
Okay. I think we should just stop right now. But you were a singles and a tag team wrestler. Which did you prefer?
I prefer tag team wrestling because I much enjoy the whole storytelling of it and the great pop of the hot tag when it's a great night. I just love the sound of when the babyface makes a tag, the crowd going crazy.
All right, what are your thoughts on the Macho Man getting inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame?
It's just way too late. He should have been in there. 10 years ago, maybe?
Sure.
It's way too late. But I'm happy because better late than never. The same thing I said about Jim the Ultimate Warrior. Better late than never. And speaking of that, could the timing have been any better? I'm so glad that he got in before he passed away, and that just had to be God's work. There's no way that could have been anything else. So I'm real proud that, not proud, but I'm happy to see the Warrior got in there, and it's great to see them putting Randy in, but it would have been so much better if he was still alive. I can just imagine the speech, "Oh yeah, Macho Man has finally made it to the Hall of Fame. Dig it." You know, it would have been so great to hear that, but we won't get the chance.
Yeah.
No, I just thought of this, and this is why you're here. So you spoke about some wrestlers who have passed away recently in WWE. ECW has this really bad rap about like being hardcore and, you know, drugs and sex and rock and roll and all that stuff. But when you think about it, the entire roster of the ECW group, there was only a few really over the years that have passed away from that group. And when you look back at WWE, there's been just countless numbers. Why do you think that there's been more from the WWE that have passed away than from this so-called crazy group from ECW?
I think that is because the higher you succeed, the harder it is to fall. That's the problem. When you attain more success and then the next day you're not the flavor of the month and no one cares about you, it's hard to not be famous and it's hard to cope with, and a lot of guys have a hard problem with that, and I think that's one of the reasons that you have such a drug overdose rate and suicide rate when it comes to guys who are that successful on a national level and then have to go back to working, you know, at fucking Walmart or, you know, their brother's garage changing oil. You know, it's difficult to make that transition from being a superstar back to being a regular citizen. So I think that's the main reason why.
Paul Heyman.
Paul Heyman is great when it comes to coming up with ideas and angles and creativity, but just horrible businessman, and couldn't manage the financial end. But I think a great on-screen talent and a great mind when it comes to putting together some interesting wrestling.
Okay, now you've seen it. You've been a part of some of them. There have been just a ton of ECW reunions, ECW shows. Do you think it's time for the fans to just let ECW, and promoters, I should say, let ECW just rest in peace?
Yes and no. I think that if done correctly, and ECW style, like I would say, quote unquote, convention and show would be great, where you do a little meet and greet and you have a show with the guys that are still able to compete, not the guys that are, 55, 60 years old. Because, again, I don't think they should go out there and embarrass themselves and just be a shell of what they used to be. I think that basically if people still have a hunger to see it, I attribute it a lot to my favorite band, which is Kiss. These guys are in their 60s, but they just sold out the Tokyo Dome the other day. So if people still want to pay to see it, why not let them do it? But it still has to be something that's worth seeing. And when you have guys that aren't quite, what they used to be, and they go out there and give a subpar performance, it really puts a bad taste in the fans' mouth. And that's, I think, the main thing is if you're going to do those type of shows, you should do them with guys that can still do it. But I really do think that in the end, those type of shows shouldn't be promoted by anyone willy-nilly just saying, hey, let's get a bunch of old ECW guys together so we can make some money. I think they should be put on and promoted by people who were there, who understand the product, and who know which guys are still worth using. So it's like this. If the fans are still willing to pay for it and they're willing to dish out their money to see the people that they love, I mean, for God's sake, Willie Nelson still plays concerts. I mean, if people want to see, and have their memories and be able to take their kids and say, hey, this is what I grew up on, I see no problem with it. I just want it to be done correctly and want the guys who are on the show not to embarrass themselves.
Awesome. Well, Axl Rotten, we skimmed the surface today. We really appreciate your time for joining us, and we definitely would love to have you back on the show down on the line. We thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, listen, guys, this is no problem. It's my pleasure. Just want to throw out just a few plugs, if you don't mind, just ways people to get a hold of me if they'd like. I already gave my email address, which is the Rotten one. That's TheRottene @gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook, of course, facebook.com/Axl Rotten ECW. On Twitter, this is going to get repetitive, at Axl Rotten, it's at Axl Rotten ECW, and on Instagram, same thing, at Axl Rotten ECW. This has been a great show. You guys did, I'll tell you what, it was a hell of a good show because the questions were great, and you guys didn't stick with the same old questions of who was your toughest opponent, tell us about your trip. This was great, and I had a great time being on the show, so anytime you guys want me back, I'd be more than happy to be a part of the show. You guys have a hell of a show here.
Hey, Axl, just one more question. Who was your toughest opponent?
All right, well, if you must know, it was Big Van Vader. Vader knocked the shit out of me in Chattanooga, Tennessee when I was like 19 years old.
Well, there you go, guys.
We put it to rest. No more asking Axl that question, all right?
Thanks, guys. It was a pleasure being here. Appreciate it.